laid out, and I'm back after the cutting out of the doors. I use the back edge of a knife to just carve that out, and then on straight cuts I have this little bit here, a little saw that fits right in there. That works out nice. So after you get, in this part, after you get all of them cut out, now comes the time to start getting rid of mold lines and any flash that you might see. This kit is pretty good. Not a lot of flash on this kit right here. Any parts you see that have flash on them or mold lines, you'd like to take those out. And the other thing you want to get rid of, and I don't know if you can see this, but you want to try to get rid of the wording there. And so you're just going to sand that out over there. Got to get rid of that. Up here, you want to get rid of that. Okay. Any other places where it's got the Revell, it says Revell Incorporated, and it tells you what it is, 68 Firebird, and any of those things. And also with your sanding, getting rid of logos. Got one here. It's not going to be seen, so you don't have to mess with it. You also want to fill these little holes here, and I'm not sure how well these will show up, but sometimes the hood has them. I can see one right there and over there. And there's another one over here and over here, and we want to be able to fill those with putty. Usually the front of the engine where the radiator is has these that need to be sanded off and filled. So any parts you see that need to be filled, now would be the time to putty them. And then along with your sanding, you sand everything down. We've got the seats together, we've got the engine together. It just has to be sanded down to take out this line. Other lines that are not going to be seen, other parts will go over them. Most important part of this is naturally the bottom of the transmission. It's about all you see when you put the engine in, so we're not too concerned about the top. So we'll get to putting putty in these holes and let that dry and start sanding. You really want to sand these edges down well. I start with, just to knock the stuff down, I start with a little 320. I'll just rip a little piece and start with the 320, and then I'll gradually get up to a finer 600, 800, 1000, 2000 grit when we're sanding the body down before we primer everything. And the other thing I was going to say we wanted to sand off, or be careful not to sand off, is you can see right there it says Pontiac. Well, be very careful if you don't have the photo etch. You're going to want to be careful of all these body emblems and logos that are on there. Make sure you don't sand those off. On this particular model, I will sand these off. I'll sand off all the emblems and everything up here because I have the photo etch to go back over it. And so we'll get to sanding and puttying. Okay. Now we've gotten all the emblems and everything off of the Firebird. I sanded down the emblems started with the 320 and finished it off all the way to 2000. So got that. I filled in some holes and took off some pins in the hood, sanded off everything on the doors. I cleaned up the rear end. Anything that had to do with the body I was looking at to see what would go the body color. I want to make sure I have that. And you'll notice there were a couple of pin marks up here. Took care of those. Took care of the seats and the seams. We'll see how they come out with primer. Might have to do a little touch up on that. Took off the Pontiac symbol on that. So trunk's clean. Took off any logos or anything on the chassis. There was something down there. Tools I used, other than the sandpaper, sanding sticks, to smooth out the edges of the doors, to give a nice rough that up and clean those edges up. And then I went with this little tool. It is an X-Acto, but it's like a chisel. And anytime they were hard to get to places, you can just chisel those off if you want to take out any detail or hard to reach places. This was pretty good. Sanded the engine down, the transmission. Also, when I was cutting it out, I used that little saw and the X-Acto blade. So now that we're to this point and we have the doors cut out, we are going to want to start building the hinges and then the door jambs. So we're going to need to cut off the door panels and the interior tub, and we're going to have to see how these fit together, how everything goes together. So we're going to have to get those in place where they glue and tack those into place, and we're going to have to do a little mocking up to see how they fit and to make marks on our doors so we can create the jambs. So the first thing I would do, kind of clean yourself off a spot, get your glass, and we're going to start to make the hinges. So 5/32 tube and your brass wire. Pretty much everything you'll need for that. Now in my previous video I did a fairly small hinge, about 7 millimeters. And this time I think I'm going to bump up the size a little bit. I'm going to go with 1 centimeter, 10 millimeters on this. Just give me a little more area to work with here. So each piece of this should measure out into 10 millimeters. And so we can roll that and get a nice cut going. In fact, I might change my blade. She's a little bit dull. So, change this out. Get that down in there so we can make some nice straight cuts. And we're just going for 6 pieces of 1 centimeter long 5/32 tubing, and you want them fairly close to the same size. We'll do a little sanding for that and make sure everything's good. So you can roll them and cut them. There you go. Just make sure you don't lose them. There. Okay, so now you've got your 6 pieces of 5/32 tubing, and sometimes I like to take a clamp them in, try to get them flat on the glass so they're even. You can dress up the ends of them a little bit so they're smooth. Okay. And take another clamp that end, take that off, and even these up so that they're all the same length. It should be good. So those 3 are good. We'll line these up. Flatten these out a little bit. Whoops. Try that again. Okay, so, oh, it's a tad bit off. I might have to do some recutting on that one. So, I think our 5/32 tube here was a little bit off. A couple of those. Okay, and we'll roll that one. Should cut through it quite nicely. Okay, so we'll just take these 3 bigger ones, line them up flat there, dress them up a little bit so that they're even and flat. Okay, grab your other clamp, now these don't have to be perfect, but it's nice to have them the same length when you're making a hinge so that things line up properly and open and shut properly. Okay, so now we've got 6 of those. Now we're going to need the wire, you're going to need probably 10. So you're going to want 1 centimeter between each. So you're going to need 50 or so millimeters. So a little longer, so you can go with 55 or 5.5 centimeters. And now we're just going to make the basic hinge, and sometimes what I like to do is just kind of flatten out this wire a little bit. Just try to roll this stuff out to flatten it out. And the first thing I'm going to do is push this through, get it about halfway. Okay, and then we're just going to bend this straight up. Okay, so that we're dealing with this piece here. So that's what we've got right there. Now we're going to take another piece that is the same length. I'm going to put that on, and we're going to bend it down so that we start to form that hinge. Now we're going to have to bend this piece into that so that we form the first part of our hinge. I like to take my long needle nose. Gives me a little more accurate bend there. So we're just going to bend this up basically like that to give us a little bit of a piece looking like this. See the two pieces. Now I'm going to cut each of these pieces toward the end here, so I leave a little gap. So now I've got that gap that I can thread these into here, or thread, and I can get these into and straightened out. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to put this together to form the first part of our hinge. Okay, I always like to try to square it up so that she lays flat. So I might take a larger pair of something just to square it up, just to get a little some snug on there, just to pinch, just to square it up a little bit. That'll add a little tension to your hinge so your door will swing and hold. So now we've got that piece. Everything's looking pretty good. Lays flat, which is what you want. And then you're going to want another piece of brass. We're we're going to take that out, and we're going to measure this one out, and we're going to go with about 80 millimeters of brass on this one. So take the 80 millimeters of brass, and we're going to thread it right through this part. And we're going to do the same thing we did on the first one. We're just going to make nice easy bends this way. And again, pinch it up a little bit so it's firm and square on the plastic. Okay. Now you're going to need your tubing for your doors. Tubing for your doors should be about 20 to 25 millimeters. I'm going to go with 20. So that's about 20 there. I'm going to roll that and cut 2 pieces of 20. Uh-oh. Just roll that in there, and there's one. Two. Now, this is where we put these on, about 20. Now, you're going to make your hinge. Here's where you got to play with it a little bit to make sure everything's flat against the glass. Okay? You can hear that tap. That means everything's not quite flat. So you got to play with it a little bit. Get it bent into shape you want, so that it will rest flat on the glass. And then this will rest flat next to it. And then we're going to take our plastic cement here and just ever so lightly glue these 2 pieces together. And there's one of the hinges. And you just have to make a couple of these hinges, and then we can start taping the body together and getting the doors set. So we